Welcome back, Chappelle. All right, so as we all know, we're going to pick right up where we left off in class today, but then also your next test, A period, is Thursday, D and F, it's going to be Friday. The study guide is already posted. It's ready to rock. It's it's long, but it's very comprehensive. And if you know the stuff on that study guide, you will be fine. All right, so if you need extra help making a family tree, creating some concept maps, just interconnecting all these people together, let me know. More than welcome to come in anytime I'm available, and we'll bang some of that stuff out, okay? But let's get back into it, right? So we left off in class talking about the rise of this chubby little squish. All right, so this guy, right, the son of Louis XIII, following 4 consecutive stillbirth children from him and his wife, Queen Anne of Austria is her name. They finally give birth to this little ball of fluff, this little right? So, and they're gonna name him Louis XIV, all right, which means Louis, gift from God, right? So, because that's when we talked about it in class. Louis XIII was kind of considered kind of soft, kind of not the best ruler on the planet because he was just so focused on creating an heir, and not to mention the fact that he was 9 years old when he took the throne, and he banished his mom at one point, and then he also relayed everything to his chief minister, Cardinal Richelieu, who blah, 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 all this other kind of crazy stuff. But Louis XIV is going to look like this when he takes the throne, right? Look at this, look at that little guy, right? Because he was only 4 when he was crowned king, right? Because of the death of his father. And then this relates back to his favorite hobby. If it will zoom, there we go. This right here is Louis, starring in one of his favorite ballets. It was his favorite thing to do while he was growing up, right? While he was growing up, because remember, if he's at 4, he's not actually in charge. His mom is ruling for him, along with a chief minister. Word on the street is that they might be lovers. Probably not, though, because he was a cardinal. You know what I mean? Cardinal Mazarin was his name. But this is what he did in his spare time while he was growing up, while he was learning to be king. He was a big fan of ballet. Very, very accomplished ballet dancer. And this is him actually playing Apollo. Don't forget that. This is one of his favorite characters to play. Because that's him, and this is what he looks like as an adult. Look at that wig, right? His dad's big doing, okay? So now, Louis XIV is going to be what he ascends the throne to be named as. Louis XIV becomes Louis XIV, the Sun King. Get it? He played Apollo in that ballet, and he believed that he was the light for all of his people. So as we can tell, between this name, gift from God, and the Sun King, Louis is a devout, divine right ruler. He believes beyond a shadow of a doubt that he is the one that is meant to rule over France with impunity and can do whatever he wants without question all the time. It does not matter, okay? So, now as the Sun King, though, he is an absolute ruler at its best. He also is going to be building the Palace of Versailles as an ultimate showing of his absolute authority, right? So, as a young buck, right, when he was growing up, you know what I mean, his mom is going to rule for him. She's going to try and stop a bunch of rebellions. There's these big things called the Fronde rebellions, where they're these people with slingshots that break windows and stuff, where the nobles are going to be very against the Bourbon monarchy. And they see this boy king as being weak, and they are like, this is our chance to topple the Bourbon monarchy and in place something that we would rather have. Because remember, it's always been between absolutists versus their nobles, absolutists versus their nobles, absolutists versus their nobles, right? So, because the nobles want power too. Now, in the past, back with Henry IV, they just chose a different religion, thinking that that would give them some ability to actually choose their own wants and their own needs and their things like that, right? So they were like, I don't have to listen to my Catholic king if I'm a Huguenot, right? So then when there's boy kings around, they start having some little mini civil wars, and these nobles try to start fighting against them. Just like back in in England, right? Certain types of nobles, quote unquote, the parliamentarians, if you want to call them nobles anyway, were leading conquests of power against their king, right? Except in England they won. So this is the Palace of Versailles. Look at how beautiful it is, right? Now we are going to look at pictures of this tomorrow, so we don't waste too much time in this flip, right? And I'll show you some awesome stuff, and we'll talk about his house and how that's a great example of his absolute authority, right? But now we're going to keep on going through, And we'll look at his bedroom in the Hall of Mirrors and all the other stuff tomorrow. But the power of Louis XIV is just absolutely ridiculous. So as he was growing up, right, he has the Palace of Versailles built. It used to be like a little hunting chateau, like just a small hunting lodge. And then he added all of this great amount of stuff onto it. And his home could occupy 20,000 people. 20,000 people could live inside of his home. So what does he decide to do? Screw it, man. I'm just going to rule from my house, right? So, because here's the other big thing. The Palace of Versailles is built about 10.9 miles outside the city of Paris. Because he's like, you know what? No. I'm not going to come to you to pass my laws, to figure this out, to collect my taxes. You are going to come to me, right? So you're going to come 10 miles outside the city to where I live at my house, and you're going to come talk to me. Oh, by the way, it houses 20,000 people, so why don't the ones that want to be close to me just live here, right? So he created, underline this, star it, make it explode, sparklies, hats, feathers, intense stuff, because he created effectively this thing he called his royal court, right? His royal court was this huge council of nobles and princes that carried out all of his policies and lived at his house, right? So they lived at his house with him to make his centralized government, one of the elements of an absolute ruler, more effective, right? That way, he could basically have the nobles under his thumb at all times, right? Now, what you'll notice, though, is like I have this written down here. Sword nobles versus robe nobles, right? So that's a big thing that you need to understand when you're talking about the French Revolution, is that there are two different types of nobles running around France, right? Sword nobles are the old nobles, right? The ones that earn their nobility through military action for their king, right? So they earn these titles, they earn this reputation, right? Through military, like through the old feudal military style, right? Not the professional army, but the old feudal one, right? That the nobles were in charge of. That's how they earn their rights. These robe nobles, on the other hand, they're the ones living inside of the royal court, right? They're the ones living at his house with him. They're the ones that are sucking up to him all the time. They're like, oh, Louis, you look so great. Oh, gosh, Louis, thanks for letting me live here. Oh, geez, Louis, let me help you pick out your shirt and help you go to the bathroom, which is actually stuff that the robe nobles did, because the robe nobles bought their titles. See, Louis is a smart guy. He's like, I'm going to make as much money as I possibly can so I can keep building my house and keep doing whatever I want. Put a giant theater in here, put on all the ballets I want to do, have a party at my place every single night right inside of my Hall of Mirrors. We'll get to that tomorrow. All right, so he starts selling offices. Fun fact is he didn't even come up with this. His grandfather came up with this. Henry IV came up with this concept, right? Selling offices of nobility. So all these new nobles were called robe nobles, right? And you could actually tell them apart on the streets. Because, here we go, where are we? Nope. You could actually tell them apart on the streets because sword nobles actually carried with them a sword, right? An image, that's a cane, the sword's right here, an image of their military background. And they were some of the only people, I think they're the only people allowed to openly carry weapons in France during this time period. So the sword nobles were identifiable by the weapons that they carried with them. Robe nobles, on the other hand, are all the suck-ups that are all standing behind Louis himself right here with their fancy robes on and their wigs, and they're like, oh, Louis, look at you, oh my God. Whenever he would walk down the stairs to go to breakfast, they'd all be waiting for him and clap. Whenever he would wake up in the morning, they'd all be like, oh, good morning, and clap for him, right? When he got off his horse, one of them helped him take his muddy, disgusting shoes off of his feet because he's like, I'm the Sun King. I don't touch that crap. And the richest people in France were helping him do all this thing. They would help him pick out his pajamas. They would help him go to the bathroom. They would help him do everything, right? So it's absolutely insane. So this is like a very, very big showing of his absolute authority, right? Oh, and by the way, he also said a very famous line as well. Well, we'll talk about another one later. But like he had another famous line where he was like, one king, one God, one law, right? So now it might actually be a variation of that. It could be one God, one king, one law. I can never really remember because I haven't actually looked it up in a long time, all right? I might need to do that. I'll clarify tomorrow. But he was an uber Catholic, right? He's like, we have one king, the Sun King. We will have one law, Louis' law that he makes for everyone, right? He actually codified it too. Now, anyway, Louis' law that he made for everyone. And he was like, and we will also have one God. We will all be Catholic. So he tried to overdo what his grandfather did. His grandfather was a Huguenot himself, right? But he destroyed Huguenot churches and schools, and he tried to force conversion. He took that Edict of Nantes that Henry IV had written, revoked it, burned it. He was like, nope. All right, so he actually wrote his own edict to overturn that one, and then began to persecute the Huguenots on a massive level, just like his great-grandmother, Catherine. All right, so anyway, now, so he's not that different from a lot of these people. But also, financially speaking, some of you are like, man, if he's building this huge house, and he's selling these offices, and he's doing all this stuff, and if he's alive during like the 16 to 1700s, he's got to be making some cheddar, right? He's got to be making some absolute cash. Well, what had happened is he kind of spent like a lot of it, all right? So like financially speaking, he kind of borderline bankrupt the French government, right? Because he believed in spending as much of your budget on palaces and royal court life, right? If you're going to have a party at your house every single night, that's going to cost some bread, right? Like, so like you're going to need it. All the while, ironically enough, while the French people are running around having bread riots and they're in a famine, they're eating this stuff called black bread, which is like a dark burnt wheat bread that's got like sawdust inside of it to make it like more expandable. And stuff. So anyway, so financially speaking, he talks to his boy, this guy by the name of Jean-Baptiste Colbert, and he's like, oh, sir, we got to adopt this new idea, mercantilism, because they all believe that there was a finite amount of money out there, and your biggest goal in life should be to try and get as much of it as you possibly can, and have as much of it and have more than the people next door, right? So, like, have more than Spain, have more than the Holy Roman Empire, have more than all the other guys, right? So he adopts this idea of mercantilism, where he's like, oh, let's export more than we import, right? We talked about this in the last unit. Let's grow more wealth and gold than the other nations in our neighborhood, right? Let's increase tariffs to make things more expensive to buy out of our country, right? The funniest thing about it is he dies with a tremendous amount of debt, right? So, like, he dies with a ridiculous amount of debt because he began to borrow money from other countries because he loved to do one thing more than anything else. And it cost him the most more than anything else. He loved to start wars, right? Like, loved them. Absolutely loved them. He was in power for 54 years. He was at war for 33 of them, right? More than half of his reign, he was at war. And wars cost money, right? The absolutists, yes, they had professional armies, but if you have a professional army now, that means that army has to be paid. That means that they have to get insurance. Or not necessarily yet, actually, take that back. They have to get paid. They all have to have the same uniform. They all have to have the same gun. They all have to have the same sword. They all have to be able to transport. You got to build a navy. You got to have this. You got to have that. So he actually dies with a tremendous amount of debt. He bankrupts almost the entire French government. And then tomorrow, okay, that's it for tonight. Tomorrow we're going to talk about absolutism in Russia. We're going to look at a bunch of really cool pictures of the Palace of Versailles, Louis' home, right? And we'll talk about that stuff tomorrow. So we'll have a flip tomorrow night as well, but then we'll be done with the unit. I know some of you are like, well, Mr. Terry, I thought you said that this unit was the absolutist and Enlightenment period. We're going to talk about the Enlightenment after your test, and we're not going to test on it. We're going to have a quiz on it, but it won't be on your following test. But we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. Don't worry too much about it. Just know that the absolutist era is what you need to know. All right, so go ahead and start reviewing. Go ahead and bang out that study guide. I'll talk to you guys later. Y'all have a good one.